Warning, this video is very stupid. Don't take it seriously. It also has the word Tetris in it a lot. Viewer discretion is advised. So, this whole thing started when I was listening to the Tetris 99 theme, and I decided to look at the comments. And I found a comment that said something along the lines of, I loved the 98 other games. A funny little joke, it's all it should have been. But that comment got me thinking, how many Tetris games actually are there? So I looked into it, and it turns out there's a lot of them. And then that got me thinking, what's the timeline? A really silly thought, couldn't get out of my head. Maybe a couple months go by, and the opening cutscene to Tetris Worlds appears in my YouTube recommended. I clicked on it, and quickly discovered that Tetris has lore.
Fellow citizens, we are facing the ultimate crisis. Of the 50 billion stars in our galaxy, less than 1 million have planets that could support life as we know it. And Hadar, our sun, has grown old. Now we learn that it will go nova.
The game's plot is that the Tetraminos, living, breathing block people, live on a planet that is dying, and so in order to survive, they plan to migrate to other planets. However, these planets aren't habitable for them, so to make them not that, they use Tetris boards, which is some kind of ancient technology, to play Tetris and make the planets grow trees and oceans and have Tetris blocked themed housing. And at the end of the game, they do all this to a planet that appears to be Earth. This is real. So after becoming aware of all of that, I realized that my dumb idea of a Tetris timeline could actually be plausible. And now, after about a month of research, I finally pieced it all together. Now, before I start explaining this whole thing, I should probably explain what I considered to be canon. 1. I'm only counting games that had an official license, so no Hatris or Dualtris. 2. The game must have something to go off of when placing it. Usually a unique background or theme. So games with just a background that isn't really anything, like Tetris 99 or Tetris Battle, can't be included because, well, how the hell do you place this? 3. No crossover games like Puyo Puyo Tetris or Magical Tetris Challenge, as that just makes things way more complex. That being said though, a game that just so happens to have crossovers in it, like Tetris NES for example, can count. Link's Awakening isn't non-canon to Zelda just because of the crossovers in it, so I think that cameos are fine. 4. Some Tetris games use photos of actual places for their backgrounds. These photos were presumably taken around the time of these games' development, so when these games do come up, I'm just going to say they take place during the year that they were released. And 5. I've decided to count the 3 Tetris games that released before the first commercial versions of the game were available. They were what started it all, so it would feel weird if they weren't a part of this. And with all of that out of the way, we can finally begin. This is the Tetris timeline. Our story begins on the Tetraminos' home planet with Tetris for the Electronica 60 and Tetris for the IBM PC. These games take place in an era where the Tetris board technology was still in its infancy, so things are a lot more primitive here. Then is Tetris Battle Drop, which shows the Tetraminos in a more prosperous era. However, this era wouldn't last forever, as eventually Hadar, their planet's sun, was about to go nova. Learning of this early, the Tetraminos devised a plan to send themselves to other planets. In Tetris Worlds, they used their Tetris board tech to make these other planets more habitable. In the end, they achieved their goal, and their species became separated as they now found new lives on different planets, one of which would become known as Earth. The story continues in the game's sequel, Tetris Elements, as the Tetraminos on Earth experiment with the planet's various elements. Around the same time, the Tetraminos on other planets explored their new homeworlds in Tetris Mania, Tetris Black, Tetris Green, and Tetris Crystal. Meanwhile, the Earth Tetraminos explored their new home in Tetris Burst and Tetris Evolution. Eventually, new life would emerge on Earth, leading to the beginning of humanity. These humans found the Tetris board technology and used it to create various structures such as the Sphinx of Ancient Egypt and the Temples of Ancient Greece in the new Tetris. This is also real. Humanity would later go through an era of fantastical magic and monsters in the game Tetris Classic. This era would continue into the games Tetris Battle Gaiden and Tetris Monsters. Tetris Monsters, by the way, is a turn-based RPG where you play Tetris to do attacks. Easily one of the strangest games I came across when researching for this. Millenniums later, humanity would enter the modern era, with said era first being seen in Tetris for the PC Spectrum Holobyte. Then is Tetris for the Amstrad PC, Tetris for the Atari by Jammer, Tetris by Tandy, Tetris for the Famicom, and Tetris for the original Game Boy, all of which prominently feature the Kremlin Palace, which would continue to appear in many more Tetris games. Following the Game Boy version of Tetris was Tetris for the NES, which featured various Nintendo characters at the end, who would return in their 8-bit forms in Tetris DS. After 21 different games comes Tetris 2, specifically the SNES version, which continues to show modern life. Super Tetris comes next, showing the modern Circus, which is also shown in Kids Tetris, where block people are present, showing that the Tetraminos still continue to exist alongside the human race. Sure. Tetris for the CDI uses photos for its backgrounds, so it takes place during the year of its release in 1992. Unfortunately, this game doesn't continue the trend of Nintendo characters showing up in these games. After Tetris 2 and Super Tetris is Super Tetris 3, which continues to use the Kremlin for its background. Then is Tetris Plus and its sequel Tetris Plus 2, which actually have stories, though they're pretty simple. A professor and his assistant try to take treasure from an Egyptian tomb. From here are a ton of games that take place in the modern day. V-Tetris, Tetris X, Tetris 4D, Tetris 64, Tetris S, Sega Tetris, which features a monkey that goes on to appear in a later game, Shockwave Tetris, taking place in the year 2000, Tetris Duckless, another Sega game that prominently features monkeys and has a soundtrack that feels kinda out of place for a puzzle game, Tetris for the WonderSwan Collar, Mina no Soft series, Tetris Advance, I hope I pronounced that right, Tetris Splash, which features Atlantis, Tetris Party, which features Mii's, Tetris Axis, which also features Mii's, and lastly Tetris Twist. After a while, humanity started to travel to space, seen in Tetris for the Apple II, Tetris by Sega, a different one, and Super Light 1500 series, the Tetris. They would eventually fully commit to this and start to explore the stars, which is seen in Tetris for the Commodore 64, which features humanoid aliens, Tetris for the Amiga, Tetris Blast, Tetris the Grandmaster, along with its sequels Absolute Grandmaster 2, Grandmaster 3 Terror Instinct, and Grandmaster Ace, the next Tetris, Tetris by U-Media, Tetris Kawamamichi, again I hope I pronounced that right, Tetris Stars, which shows the Tetraminos that landed on the water planet during Tetris Worlds, now evolved into Star People, Tetris Ultimate, and finally, Tetris N3T Work. This timeline is really dumb. Like, really, really dumb. But it's not completely unfounded. The Tetris series has had many things that continue to show up. Whether it be a fantasy setting, a space setting, the Kremlin Palace, whatever Tetris the Grandmaster was supposed to be. Hell, Puyo Puyo Tetris invented an original cast of Tetris characters who are astronauts exploring space in a futuristic setting. My point being that although this timeline is really stupid, it's at least a fun idea. I mean, it's not like this is the first time that a bunch of games that were clearly never intended to connect to one another were put on a single timeline. The Tetris timeline is stupid, but it's a fun kind of stupid, and it was all possible because some developers in the early 2000s, while planning out a new Tetris game, decided to give it a story. Or maybe they're not connected at all, who knows?